All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call to order the Wednesday, December 17th, 2025, 1 p.m. Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership full partnership meeting, and it is all virtual. Ruth or Logan, or do we need to read the electronic meeting statement?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that. This meeting, can y'all hear me, by the way?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
thank
good.
you, Logan.
This meeting of the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership is being held pursuant to Code of Virginia subsection C of section 2.2-3708.3, which allows a public body to hold all virtual public meetings. The meeting is being held via electronic video and audio means through Zoom online meetings and is accessible to the public. The method for holding this meeting shall not change unless a new meeting notice is provided. Should the electronic transmission fail, you may reach out to the TJPDC at rmrec@tjpdc.org.
All right, thank you. And then we'll need to go through and do a roll call of our partnership members. If you're a voting member, if you could go ahead and unmute your mic so when your name's called, we'll be able to say here.
And for the purposes of roll and the any voting slash consent agenda, folks will need to have their cameras on as well. Um, just a reminder. Don't need to have them on necessarily the whole time, but all right. Ned Galloway or Mike Pruitt,
Here.
Michael Payne or Lloyd Snook, John McCluskey or David Mastrovich,
Here.
Rachel Jones, Jesse Rutherford or Ernie Reed. I think y'all are both here.
Here.
Yep, both are here.
I'm here.
Diantha McKeel,
Here.
Margaret Clare or Rose Valentino, Keith Smith, Luke Rourke, Fitzgerald Barnes, Emily Dreyfus or Emily Smith, Kurt Kiesecker or Taro Matsuno,
Here.
William Park or Alice Fletcher,
Present.
Peter Holman or George Ballou.
This is George Ballou. I'm here for Peter Holman.
Excellent. Cameron Moore, Dan Rosenzweig or Michelle Wamsley,
Michelle here.
Shayla Washington or An Quinn, Sunshine Mathan or Alicia Garcia, Alice Rauscher or Rachel Hobbs,
Rachel here for Alice.
Annette Hyde,
Here.
Kim Highland or Andrea Madison.
I'm here, and actually, Rachel Jones just called me and said she did not receive an invite to this. So she might have just missed
Okay.
it, but I just wanted to alert you to that.
Thanks, I'll send one over to her.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, did we do Dave Norris,
Here.
Luis Oyola,
Here.
John Sales or Kathleen Glenn Matthews?
All right,
All
and
right.
Logan, I saw Mr. Snook and Margaret Clare join after we started going through the list, so they are
Oh,
there.
great.
I don't know if it doesn't appear anybody else was missed. All right, and I'm sure some will join. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate everyone joining online. We've got a content-rich meeting today. We hope you will find it helpful and informative. First item, though, we need to do the comments from the public. Is there anyone online who is a member of the public who wishes to give comment? I do not. You can raise your hand or say so. All right, seeing none, we will move on from comments from the public. And then Logan or Ruth, did we meet the quorum needed for votes?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, I believe we did.
All right, so our one action item that we need to take today, the consent agenda, includes the minutes of the September 24, 25 meeting. Also, the fiscal year 26 year-to-date financials, both were in the packet. Is there anyone that needs to make any adjustments to the minutes and or have questions about the minutes or the financials? All right, hearing none, if there can be a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. From Diantha.
Is there a second?
Second from Lloyd Snook.
All right, a first by Diantha McKeel, a second by Lloyd Snook. If everyone will unmute your microphones if you're a voting member. And all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you, everyone. That's the last time we have to do that today. All right, we're going to move into number 4 on old business, the housing study update. And we have Mel and Jonathan. Is it Mel and Jonathan? I saw Jonathan here.
Yeah,
Where'd Jonathan?
Here.
Great. I will. Oh, there you are, Mel. I didn't see you down there. All right. Mel and Jonathan are going to provide the update to the housing study. They've been with us before, but by all means, Jonathan, Mel, feel free to provide some background or intro if you feel that's necessary.
Sure.
But we will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ned. A number of you have been in touch with us, throughout this process. And so for those of you that haven't, I'll just give the briefest scope of work description and let me know if you guys have questions. Just raise your hand or speak up. So I'm Mel Jones. I'm the co-director of the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech. We are partnered with Housing Forward Virginia to complete a regional housing study for the TJPDC. We like to call these regional plus local housing studies because our analysis and recommendations are both regional, and for each locality included in the TJPDC, with the exception of Louisa for the recommendations, they asked not to be included for that part. We begin with a hefty data analysis, both quantitative and qualitative. Many of you have participated in focus groups, in listening sessions, and other interviews, telling us what's going on in the community and helping us build that intuition and tell the story around the data. So we're very appreciative of that. And I'll let Jonathan talk about the side of the scope, about recommendations development, and also about the policy analysis that's underway. Jonathan.
Thanks, Mel. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jonathan Knopf, Executive Director for Programs for Housing Forward Virginia. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, statewide organization dedicated to advancing housing affordability through research, data, education, and had the chance to work with Mel and our friends at the center on a number of these housing studies, including this one that we're working on for you all in TJPDC. And so, as Mel mentioned, our role is to support the center and TJPDC specifically with policy analysis and policy recommendations. That will be the second phase of this work after Mel and her team have completed the data and market analysis. So we are just now beginning to collect information on existing policies and programs throughout the region to get an inventory of what the region and its communities are already doing around advancing housing and housing opportunity. And so we'll do some initial assessments of those and then use that those findings along with the data and everything that we have heard so far in our conversations with stakeholders and practitioners to begin working with the localities and the PDC on custom tailored policy solutions that are meant to advance particular strategies and initiatives that maybe a community is already planning or already has underway and needs some help expanding or growing, or looking into and building out a roadmap for new initiatives or ideas that a community has maybe thought about for a while, but based on what the data is saying and what the needs are, they really need some help figuring out how to design a particular new policy or change their zoning ordinance or whatever it may be. So we really just want to be a useful assistant to folks already doing good work in the region, and not reinvent the wheel anywhere, and really just try to plug in however best we can be helpful. And that process will take place over much of next year. So you'll be seeing more of me probably and our team, but we look forward to it. So I'll turn it back over to Mel.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. I have for you guys some preliminary findings, but before we dive into those, does anyone have questions about our work or comments, wishful wishes about what the outcomes would be, or the types of analysis you would like to see?
All right. Any feedback or comments here?
Oh, Ned, you're very quiet.
Oh, I went quiet. All right, go ahead. I'll figure that out.
Okay. That's strange. And you guys are welcome to use the chat as well if it makes it easier for you. Okay, I'm gonna pull up PowerPoint. So I'll reinforce that these are preliminary findings. This is the result of analysis we've done so far, and a lot of what we've heard from folks, or synthesis of what we've heard from folks so far. I also want to let you know that included in our scope is a data update. So right now we're working with the most recent American Community Survey and CHAS data that we have access to, but we're anticipating that the CHAS should be updated soon. And the census ACS actually gives a schedule. And so that update should be complete by the end of January, at which point we will do a massive data update. So you'll see data that is, a little bit old, but that's the latest available. So, but do know that before the study is finalized, we will update the data once. So I'm going to give you a sample of focus group themes as well as data. And the first thing I'm going to start with is housing insecurity, which you guys know well. We interviewed or engaged in focus groups with realtors, developers, housing service providers, public school folks. We talked to lenders. We haven't talked to a lot of employers yet, but we do hope to. And have done a number of interviews with individuals who are involved in the housing delivery process. So what you see here is a synthesis of what we heard from them, and also from local elected officials and staff folks, just everyone we talked to. So, we knew this from the onset because you guys mentioned that it should be a big part of what we did in the study. But how the affordable housing supply in the region is really not enough to meet demand and need. Then there's lots of observations of families doubling and tripling up due to crisis, families unable to meet basic needs because of either fear or stigma of engaging with support services, or they're not fully available to meet all the need. There was a big emphasis on more affordable housing that includes wraparound services and the need for trust building. Transportation is also, a connected issue to housing. And schools, for instance, felt that they could provide more extensive support but the resources and infrastructure are just not there to provide them. And transportation was a key component of this issue. Senior well-being also came up as a concern. To kind of reflect this in the data, I'm showing you the rental gap analysis. So here you have all of the households who are renters, as well as the stock that is being rented in TJPDC. It's divided by income level. So the first two columns on the left-hand side are the blue households with income, extremely low income, and stock that is affordable to folks with extremely low income. The first conclusion you get from looking at these two columns is that the right-hand column, the number of units, is smaller than the left-hand column, the number of households. So we don't have enough physical stock to serve extremely low-income households. Then each of these are color-coded to give you more information. So on the household side, in the blue, the dark blue is households that are cost burdened. So they spend more than 30% of their income on housing and may make choices between housing and other necessities. The light blue are those households who are not cost burdened. Over on the stock side, you have yellow and green being, the primary colors. Yellow is units that are occupied by renters with household incomes greater than the affordability range. So they have an income above 30% of AMI. The green are folks who are sort of matched, right? They have a unit that's affordable to them and they have household income less than 30% of AMI. And then the final little hashed area there is vacant units. It's hashed because the sample size, the population of vacant units in this category is too small for us to create like a pinpoint accurate estimate. Which makes sense. Like if there's an affordable unit out there for somebody, they're gonna find it. There are very few vacant available units that would be affordable to extremely low income. I'm not going to go over all of the other pairs in the same amount of detail as I've just gone over that one. But if you look at the second set of columns, households with very low incomes and stock affordable to them, you have a new color, and that's orange. And so the folks who weren't able to find a affordable or weren't able to rent a unit affordable to a household with an income less than 30% of AMI have to live somewhere, right? Their choices are experience homelessness or accept cost burden. And so that's what they do is they accept cost burden. They're colored in orange here. They're renting a unit that's affordable to somebody 30 to 50% of AMI, but their income is lower than 30% of AMI. You see the same phenomena in 50 to 80% of the 50 to 80% of AMI category. And even though in the two sets of middle columns, 30 to 50 and 50 to 80, in theory, there's enough housing stock to serve the households in these groups. You still end up with cost burden households and households that are renting a unit that costs too much for them because of not having enough stock at the bottom and also competition coming in from the top. If you look at the rightmost columns, right, the households with income greater than 80% of AMI and compare it to the stock of units affordable to folks with incomes greater than 80% of AMI, you can see that there are very few units to serve that group. And so they rent units in the middle that cost less than they can afford. And there's lots of competition here in the middle because we have such physical gaps on each side. This is a complicated graph that is related to another graph, right? The ownership gap. So we don't presume, housing people's choices. Some people do want to rent a unit that costs way less than they can afford and it's meeting their needs. And, why should they do anything else? But there's certainly those out there who would like to trade up that can't. There are some that are hanging out in their rental unit that doesn't necessarily meet their needs, but what they want their next step to be is home ownership, and they can't find something there. So there's a lot going on with these folks, but the key thing that I want you to take away is that, we hear in the focus groups that there's a problem with housing insecurity, and you can see that very clearly in this graph with the levels of cost burden up to 80% of AMI and the amount of competition that those households experience in your market. So I'll move on from there. Oh, this is the homeownership gap, but actually I'm not going to stop and talk about this because I don't think I have enough time. The next thing I want to talk to you about is unmet demand in general. So we heard loud and clear that there's strong demand in your communities at all price points and buyer income levels. Lenders and realtors who have, and builders to some degree, who have a lot of insight into this, also reflected the severity of the affordability crisis and added, the importance of availability in this equation, and noted that it disproportionately, in the ownership market particularly, disproportionately impacts first-time home buyers and young households. Households need more financial literacy and support. They do benefit from increasingly flexible loan products, but all of this is in the face of a very limited stock. And so there's only so much that flexible loan products and financial literacy and perfect credit scores and so on can do when there's such high demand and so limited stock. Prices and demand supply imbalance make this an urgent problem for sure. The data also reflects it. So here you have median annual days on the market by sale price quartiles. So essentially you've divided all sales into quartiles. First quartile being the lower priced units, the fourth quartile being the highest priced units. And you can see over time, days on the market for all of these price points going down. But very interestingly, in 2023 and 2024, we see those most high-priced units, the fourth quartile, have days on the market far lower than all of the other price points, indicating that the supply-demand imbalance is possibly greatest in that fourth quartile area. This helps us understand that there is demand out there for higher priced units. But I want to qualify that demand could be coming from inside TJPDC or from outside TJPDC. So, when we think about building housing units, we think about building them at every price point in order to respond to demand that looks like this. We hope that when we build them at the top and that when we build them at the bottom, that it will relieve pressure in the middle. That is true at the top when people who are in TJPDC want to trade up and can trade up to a higher priced unit, freeing up one of those lower priced units for someone who needs them. But again, that qualification that this demand may also be coming from outside of TJPDC, right? So the people who want to trade up inside TJPDC and the people who want to move to TJPDC may be competing for all of these units. So just keep that in mind. Moral bottom line of this story is that you all need more units, of course. We like to see days on the market be somewhere between 30 and 60 days on the market because we hope that folks can feel comfortable that if they need to leave, they can sell their home within 1 or 2 months. But if they are trying to buy, they are not under so much pressure that they can't compete with the financing that best meets their needs, and they have to waive inspections, other sort of things like that. We want both sides to feel comfortable in the market. Median sale price is another indicator of supply and demand, and you guys have steadily increased median sale price over the 2016 to 2024 time period. On the rental side, we use vacancy to market vacancy to indicate demand. We look for rental or market vacancy in any case to be between 2 and 7% in order to encourage investment in our community's housing stock. You can quickly see that, well, first of all, let me explain that in some cases we have ranges, and that is because of the quality of the data. So where we have a range, again, the sample size is not large enough for us to do a pinpoint estimate of vacancy. So we have these ranges, and in some cases the ranges tell us something really meaningful. In other cases, the ranges are less helpful. So for example, in Albemarle, a rental vacancy rate between 1.5 and 3.8 says to us that the market is probably tight, could be balanced, right? But is certainly on the tighter side of balanced if there is rental balance there. Similar for Charlottesville. But then if you look at Nelson County, less than 8.37, this isn't really a useful conclusion for us. So what we did was looked at the overall market vacancy rate on the right-hand side to try to understand a little bit better the tightness of the markets. And when you look at the overall vacancy rate, the sample size is bigger. And so we have a smaller range, right? And so we can see very clearly that the Albemarle market is too tight, right? Charlottesville, again, we're still balanced between too tight and balanced. And so thankfully for the Charlottesville market, we have additional data from both the realtors and from CoStar to supplement this. So that's nice. The Green market, way too tight. Likewise, the Louisa market, too tight. Fluvanna, we have inconclusive data here. And Nelson, this indicates, right, that it's balanced or too tight. The homeownership market is certainly tighter than the rental market. Going back to the focus groups, we heard that development is shifting away from urban infill toward outlying areas. We heard that permitting processes are unpredictable and a barrier to development. We heard that housing supply is really perceived to be constrained by land use regulations. And that everyone would be better off if there was more coordination between local governments and developers. We heard this from builders, developers, staff. We heard it from realtors. And so we had, a lot of consensus in a way around these conclusions. We heard about so many great services being provided, and I just listed a very few here. But another major theme that we heard is that collaboration and organization of the service provision writ large, right? Not individual organizations. Individual organizations are well organized and doing their best with very limited funds, right? But we're talking more about like organization between agencies and collaboration between agencies in order to even increase the efficiency of what's being provided and use the funds even even better. We heard a little bit that competition for limited funding stifles collaboration, and overcommitted, overwhelmed organizations diminish trust and collaborative spirit. And this is not, anything anyone's doing out of malice or anything negative, but rather everyone's trying so hard to serve this huge, overwhelming need, that people slip through the cracks, or that person can't answer all 150 phone calls that they received that day. It's really that the system is overwhelmed. And again, take this a little bit lightly, right? Lack of regional collaboration means services are uneven, sometimes duplicative and inefficient. We heard across our work that agencies do communicate, right? And that they would like to increase that communication and collaboration. But I think leadership for that collaboration is not as present as in other places that we've worked. And developing this new level of collaboration and service provision will be an important part of the future, right? A major opportunity for TJPDC. Let's see here. Just having a look at the time, and we do have some time, which I'm so excited about, because we would love to hear your reactions to this, right? Everything that we do, Mel in Blacksburg, Jonathan in Richmond, right? We have to show this to you and hear your reflection in order to know if we're on the right track. So we would love, if you guys have any comments, places you would like us to dig deeper, jurisdictions that you see or that are doing great things in these ways that you would like us to look at, as we think about this further, please.
All right. First, how's my mic?
Yes, I can hear you again.
All right. Hopefully figured that out. All right. I saw a lot of cameras go off, so I'm going to start asking for questions, and then we'll go from there. Oh, I see Supervisor Malik has joined us as a member of the public. Any question, and I'll come right to you there, Ann. Any policy members have questions to start? All right, go ahead, Supervisor Malik.
Thank you very much. I was intrigued by the last comment you made, Mel, about collaboration. And so I'd be interested to learn if any of the local governments actually make that a requirement of their funding, because we have many agencies who are funded with local taxpayer money. And so I'm always looking for a way to improve the process. So I'd love to learn about that offline or something. And maybe you already have references you can share by email. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. There are some jurisdictions across the Commonwealth that do that, and I would be happy to share more information about that. And I'm happy that that's something that you're interested in, because that reflection, it is what we heard, that people were interested in taking that collaboration to the next level.
All right, other questions or reactions to the information that's coming out of here? Yep, Kim, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I think you're dead on all this, Mel. You're on the right track. What I noticed, as far as the collaboration goes, is there was a lot more before COVID. Now, I came in right in May 2020, so that was great timing for me. And I continued to uncover some of the collaboration that was going on prior to 2020, which seemed to be a little more integrative between the organizations. And I'm wondering if a solution would be to start workshopping some of that in small groups, according to each county's needs, and kind of uncover what's worked in the past before. There's been a lot of change in leaderships with all of the county governments, with all of the agencies. I just reached out. Unfortunately, Sunshine's not on here today, but our predecessors, along with the previous Louisa County predecessor, had some sort of arrangement, and I don't know what it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it would be so interesting to hear, if things had been working and then a change in leadership or the disruption of COVID or the overwhelming need during and after COVID just kind of broke some of that down. Yeah. Thanks, Kim. That's so insightful.
Thank you.
Luis, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mel, for the presentation. I was wondering regarding the conversation around service providers, if anything came up in focus groups or data around the efficacy of particular services or funds provided. Um, not specific to providers, but rather the services themselves. And if there's anything to glean about like what has the most bang for its buck or
Yeah,
whatever, you know.
wow, that's a great question. And some of that stuff has come up not in the focus groups, but rather in the literature reviews that are part of our scope. And the first thing that everybody's been asking me recently is like the efficacy of the housing first model, right? So there's lots of these questions spinning around right now. What's the best strategy? And, where should we get the biggest bang for our buck? I will say that, um, in these focus groups, central intake and the pipeline from homelessness to home ownership is always something that kind of comes up and feels like in your guys' region is a major opportunity to address. And the central intake portion and the process being guided from central intake is something that a lot of research has suggested is an important part of service provision. And so are there any things that you're interested in that you would like us to take a look at? Was there something particular in your mind about?
I mean, home ownership is
Okay.
going to be at the top of my mind because of my
Yeah.
role. Um, but really the full spectrum from eviction prevention to what you're talking about, housing first, and then yeah, with home ownership, efficacy around programs for either down payment or housing counseling or just straight development subsidy, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we have addressed, particularly the eviction prevention piece, we have addressed as part of our work. The home ownership piece, we are going to be addressing as sort of a side item. But I will also say that, all of the analysis suggests that demand side home ownership interventions are not as appropriate as they once were because of our supply challenges. But yes,
Yeah.
all of this, we're going to include it in the report. So thanks for bringing that up.
And Mel, I just want to mention one thing about that. I think there's a distinction between just in terms of thinking about, bang for your buck and cost efficiency of different programs and solutions. There's the operational kind of internal side of it. How many person hours does it take to administer a program and, get a household to success and whatever it may be defined, whether it's, eviction diversion or purchasing a home. And then there's the structural efficiency of that investment or intervention in terms of the market, which is what you were just alluding to, Mel, which, our, down payment assistance per dollar does not go as far as it used to because we have limited supply and prices have gone up for homes for people to be able to buy, particularly at the range that first-time home buyers, have theoretical access to. And so I don't think we have within the capacity and framework of this study to audit all the different programs within the region, and that's certainly not our intention. I think what we can do instead, or are better positioned to do maybe, is try to place the scope of existing programs and work being done in the region into a kind of cohesive narrative that explains how they are working well or not as efficiently because of structural and market barriers and challenges that have been created over the past few years or have been kind of longstanding issues within the region in terms of access to supply, and similar things that need other solutions to fix. It's not our intention to say this program being run by this nonprofit is not working well and it needs to go away because, it's not serving as many people as we want it to. That's not the goal or our intention here. We want to say these programs are not as successful as they could be because they are limited by these barriers. And here's how we can try to solve these barriers so that these programs can better serve the people that we want them to serve.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments?
One of them that's been under-addressed, I think, and we're a little unusual. Well, there are other organizations here who do home repairs, but the effect of keeping people in their homes, there's been a direct correlation in our area anyway, to preventing homelessness, and certainly substandard living conditions. But it would really help us with funding if we were able to demonstrate the efficacy of those programs and broaden their use.
Yeah. And Kim, actually, we have part of our literature review focused on senior housing preferences, and we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole. That's exactly what you described. And yeah, so when we're thinking about the efficacy of programmatic approaches, we'll be looking at the national research around the evaluation of those types of approaches to bring that to you guys and say, maybe you could tweak this or think about adding this program because it would help, strengthen that even more.
And a different thing, I'm sorry if I'm going a little off track, but I noticed when we pulled data, there was data for very little data for 2-bedroom home size, which is really a huge gap in the market that we've identified for particularly for seniors and for small families. And I don't know I know my 2 counties, it's about 2.5 people per household. I don't know if the other counties have the same figures, but that demonstrates to me, there's a huge need for smaller single family homes or 2-bedroom rental units. That's, it kind of got pushed out of the market by developers. And as nonprofits, we tend to look at it a little bit differently. So our push has been to 1- and 2-bedroom smaller units.
Very astute, Kim. Yes, we do observe that all over Virginia and really the country.
It was like a 1950s, 60s mentality and, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And I think we could change it a bit where we say 2-bed, 2-bath, but it was completely abandoned at some point.
Yeah. Possibly because of minimum lot sizes, but anyway, there's lots to say about that for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
I just want to offer, this is more of a kind of a brainstorming question that's been happening in my brain. I mean, obviously we've heard before how regulation and or affordable housing requirements in Charlottesville and Albemarle can be prohibitive or inhibit building. So that's not a new thing that we've heard. But when you look at the whole region, it seems like everybody's dealing with the same problem: low supply, high demand across all levels.
Yeah.
And I know that the other jurisdictions don't necessarily have the same requirements for affordable housing that Charlottesville and Albemarle does. So was the conversation just there that regulation gets in the way, or did it get a little bit more nuanced to say, so, if let's say for an example, Albemarle turns down regulation, that should open up supply based if what is said is true, then does that then turn around and take the pressure off the other counties because they're leaving to go to those counties? I mean, have those types of conversations been happening?
Yeah. So I will say that the conversation around regulation and process and infrastructure, which I want to put kind of wrap up all together, right? Because there are these levers that we pull in terms of regulation and infrastructure that we had across all of the counties. I also want to point out a bit of detail that, someone who wants to live in a more urban place, but can't afford to live there, may or may not choose to move to a more rural place instead. They may choose to move to like a Waynesboro instead of a Charlottesville, right? So you guys also have tons of connections with even neighboring regions. Your commute shed is quite large. So there's a lot going on there. The conversation around regulation and infrastructure was very nuanced. And it wasn't, just like if we could only turn it down here, maybe we would fix it. Rather, there were very specific comments about places where folks hoped to have more density, places where they wished they could get more infrastructure because those places already have the decreased regulation, places where they feel like regulation that was meant to help kind of got a little skewed and ended up hurting. So there's a lot of conversation in that way. And we will continue as folks make themselves available to have conversations with staff and elected officials in each of the jurisdictions to try to figure out which pieces of legislation or regulation they would like us to dig into, if they would like us to dig into regulation and help tweak things to make it better. You guys are connected as a community, but you're so connected to the outside as well, right? So regulation in Stanton, Augusta, Waynesboro impacts Charlottesville, Albemarle, for example, and vice versa. Yeah. So Ned, I know that's not very specific. Well, we would definitely love to have a conversation with you and get a little bit more specific.
As we continue to have the conversation with everyone, be interested to see how that ticks out related to the different nuances of the 6 different jurisdictions that we have. Any final one more? We probably have time for one more question or comment. All right. I'm sure if you think of a question or comment after today, I suspect Mel and Jonathan would be welcome to an email coming over their way. You can also send it to Lori Jean. She would be happy to field the question and then get that over to the right folks and then get that back out to the partnership. So thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thanks,
the next item on our agenda, we have, it's under new business. We have a presentation today on the Lotus campaign. The Lotus campaign helps to address homelessness. It is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, or in Asheville, Charlotte, North Carolina, down in North Carolina, if I've got my cities wrong. Beth Silverman is joining us today. She is the executive director of the Lotus campaign. And I'm happy to say that when you think about the 4 pillars of our organization, Beth has had leadership roles, it appears, in all the different sectors. Local government, government in general, private, for-profit, as well as the nonprofit world. So with that, I welcome Beth to the Regional Housing Partnership meeting today, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation. Good afternoon, Beth.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I've got a couple slides, so give me a second to just share my screen, and then we can dig in. And let me just get this on full screen.
And Beth, did I misspeak? I was always thinking Charlotte. Is it Charlotte or is it in Asheville?
So we started in Charlotte, and we are now in 2 cities. We're in Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina.
Gotcha.
I live in Asheville, which may be the confusion.
That's probably where it popped into my brain.
I think if Asheville, if some, actually, if some of the conditions in Asheville were different, I think we target that as the next city. So if you guys are okay with it, I cannot find the full screen. Actually,
Control L should do it.
There we go. So I have a couple of slides I'm going to present, and then I wanted to leave a substantial amount of time for there to be some back and forth with this group of folks. But before I get started, and I know this is a little tricky because a lot of you have your cameras off, I'm going to ask the crowd a question. I'm going to poll you, and if you don't want to put your camera on, that's fine. I will, you can use the hand raise emoji or however you're most comfortable. But raise your hand if something has gone wrong for you in the last year. Okay. I'm trying to scroll to see everyone's hands. Well, it looks like we have a lot of people that have raised their hands. So why I ask this question is, according to MIT economist Peter Temkin, escaping poverty takes almost 20 years with absolutely nothing going. So I don't know about anyone sort of in this crowd, but I don't think I've ever had a year with something going wrong. And for those of you that were following the news last year, Asheville got hit very hard by an unexpected hurricane. That was definitely not in my plans for the year, is dealing with sort of 2.5 months of no power. So great to be here. My name is Beth Silverman. I am one of the co-founders, and I am the executive director of Lotus Campaign. So Lotus Campaign is a partnership of unexpected allies, real estate developers, landlords, and social service providers, solving the unsolvability of homelessness. And the work is really about how do we rewrite the playbook on how to solve systematic homelessness and housing affordability challenges. And I'll go into this in a little bit more depth. We have one program called the Landlord Participation Program. Very simple name, gets at sort of the core, where we bring together the for-profit real estate community alongside of nonprofit social service partners to unlock stable housing for people experiencing homelessness. And a key part of how we do this is we tackle the economic and financial guarantees that are really required to rent to someone who wouldn't qualify. And then we also ensure that someone has ongoing support as they're getting back on their feet. So that key of sort of the economic guarantees and ensuring someone has social services or trauma-informed care or some sort of network of support. And a big key to our model is working with partners in neighborhoods with strong opportunity structure. So as most of you know, affordable housing doesn't typically exist in neighborhoods that are close to parks, grocery stores, transit, or close to major employers. And a critical part of our approach is facilitating housing in neighborhoods that are mixed income, where someone can thrive and rebuild their lives. So with that, we're going to dig in. So as I mentioned before, Lotus brings together unlikely allies. So this is landlords, this is investors, developers, and then all types of nonprofit partners. We work with partners who serve everyone from high-functioning chronically homeless to at risk of being homeless. And the idea is, can we open up a segment of the housing market that is unavailable, which would be market rate, for the most part, multifamily units. And again, our mission is to unlock housing, but really we believe that homelessness is solvable, and we take an economic approach to do that. So what we do, as I said before, is we give the real estate sector an easy way to say yes, and I'll go into specifically how we do that. But you have to figure out a way to make sure the economic business model for an owner, a developer, investor isn't jeopardized. So we've developed a program that gets at that. Social service organizations, for the most part, have clients that are ready for housing, that next step in housing, but often don't have the relationships or even vocabulary to connect with maybe the market rate real estate community, or even the funding to pay for things like security deposits, application fees, if a voucher is being used, expedited inspections, things like that. And then someone who is either coming out of homelessness or housing insecure, they need a place to live and oftentimes don't even pass go with the first economic qualification, whether it's credit check, rental history, or income verification. So since we launched in the summer of 2018 in Charlotte, we've had a 96% success rate. So what does that mean? That means that 96% of the residents we sponsor in our programs either renew their leases with the support of Lotus's programs, or renew their leases on their own, or successfully move on to independent housing. And why this is really important is the national research shows that once someone who has experienced homelessness is placed into housing, approximately 25% of these individuals return to homelessness in their first year after being housed. So we really, really care not just about facilitating housing and getting someone into units, but making sure they stay housed once we have opened up some units for them as part of our program. This group, just based on what Logan had shared with me, it seems like you guys are all experts in your particular space. So here are some things you already know. The challenge of homelessness is large and oftentimes undercounted. The point in time count, while a great tool, is by no means expansive or precise. It is a social and an economic issue, and a big part of the solution is economic. And we often are not actually addressing the supply and demand aspect of homelessness, right? Housing is not the only part of the solution to homelessness, but it is always part of the solution. So what does Lotus do? We engage the private sector to help solve homelessness. We deploy resources differently and solve for the economic risk that is often a roadblock, both for a housing provider and an individual or family to access housing. So what we do is we use a small amount of philanthropic capital to overcome risks for the participating landlord, to open up doors for an individual or a family, and to really amplify the impact of our social service partners. And so what do we do specifically in terms of, I'll call it risk mitigation plus, plus, plus? Our funding is used for a payment in lieu of security deposit. If a voucher is being used, we'll pay to expedite an inspection process to make sure units are not sitting vacant while waiting for an inspection. We pay for renter's insurance up front. We cover application fees. And then two big things, we guarantee against loss of rent and tenant-caused damages. Not everyone is going to successfully, and I'll get to our metrics in a later slide, but not everyone is going to work out. And I think sort of a big part of how we're able to get landlords to partner with us is we say, you know what, something might go wrong. And if it does, here's what we do. The other thing we also do is if we can't resolve an issue with our social service partners within 30 days, we will cover eviction costs, court fees, and legal costs. If there's no other remedy, if we've exhausted all the possibilities, we will actually show up in court and testify on behalf of the landlord. But in exchange for that, we ask that they give us 30 days to resolve any issues. And for the most part, we've had things, for example, where one of our sponsored residents, there was an error from her job and her paycheck was a shorter amount. And because for the most part, evictions are automatically filed after a certain amount of time, we were able to step in, bridge that gap while her employer figured out how to remedy the situation and ensured that she wasn't evicted. So the other things that are super important is we have very close partnerships with our social service partners. We have an application process and selection criteria of who we partner with. I will give you the golden secret is we are looking for social service partners who have very strong ongoing support and services. We are not case managers. We do have program directors has a background in social work. But what we're really trying to do is allow the social services sector to do what they do best, give the real estate sector an easy way to be part of the solution and do what they do best. And to some degree, you could say we're like the glue. We also require that our partners do a once a month visit to a resident in their unit. And the reason behind that is a case manager is going to see much more quickly than a property manager if something is off. And then hopefully we can resolve whatever the circumstances are. And as I said before, we cover eviction expenses and any reimbursement of legal costs. So what are we helping individuals and families? What are we helping them with? We are helping them with essentially the four big things that are roadblocks on a path to safe and stable housing. That would be rental history, whether or not someone has a steady employment record and even qualifies based on their income, credit, and then also security deposit. And as I mentioned before, we really partner with landlords and owner operators in neighborhoods of opportunity. And if you go to our website, I think buried in the How It Works page, there's this awesome interactive map you can play with that shows all of the properties we partner with and layers on a bunch of social and economic mobility data, because the data is very clear. Your zip code matters. And especially if you're escaping poverty, living in mixed income communities close to transit, close to jobs, close to neighborhood retail makes a very big difference. So as I mentioned before, this is just very simple amenities that I think each of us here would want to be close to. So some form of transportation, schools, close to jobs, close to everyday neighborhood retail. Our goal is to amplify the impact of our social service organizations. So what we ask of them is to vet and identify who from their client base is ready for housing. Oftentimes in the continuum of solutions for homelessness, there's a lot of emergency triage and a lot of emergency response. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's permanent housing with closed wait lists and vouchers, and there's not a lot in the middle. So we ask that our partners from their client base determine who's ready to be on a lease, right? And support them once they're in housing throughout the lease term. So all sponsored residents are sponsored by a social service organization. We make sure that there's a relationship between our social service partners and our landlord partners. That sort of breaking down of silos is super key, because together they're the keys to the solution. Apart, they are not. And as I mentioned before, our biggest requirement of our nonprofit partners is you have to provide ongoing support to a sponsored resident. That's going to look different based on an individual's circumstances. That could be a once a month case management session. That might be, going to a program or having a peer mentor. And that might be 3 times a week of case management. So this is Mario. And I actually know Mario pretty well. He's been in our program 3 years. And like me, he's very mediocre at keeping his houseplants alive. So Mario came to us from a program in Charlotte called Hope Haven. They're a substance recovery program. And he had lived on site at their facility for 2 years, had gone through all of their layers of treatment and recovery, had a part-time job. And once it was time to leave living at Hope Haven's facility, the reality was he couldn't afford anything on the market, and he wasn't technically homeless. So we formed a partnership with them, and fast forward 3 years, Mario has graduated from our support. He is qualified on his own for a 2-bedroom apartment with his now wife, and now has full-time employment as a commercial truck driver. So what Mario just needed was a little bit of roadblocks being removed, some economic support, and some time. So this is our 2024 impact. And if we were like 2 months later in the year, I would have our 2025 impact. But so in 2024, we supported 258 residents. We had expanded to Raleigh, North Carolina, so we had a jump of 90%. And since our founding in 2018, have facilitated housing for over 600 folks. Fast forward today, we're actually at 750 individuals. Both of our programs in Charlotte and Raleigh are busting at the seams. What's important, though, about any of these numbers, is the 96% keeping people housed. And if you see buried down under the 600 plus, we have an eviction rate of less than 1%. Which is really important for a community of folks that have had housing instability and insecurity for so many years. We have about 40 different partners now. So that spans in Charlotte about 50 different residential communities. In Raleigh, it's a little bit smaller, but that's a newer program. And then we do have a number of residents who have renewed their leases within our program 2, 3, 4, and 5 times. But again, sort of the metrics that we care most about, it's not just how many people we facilitated housing, it's renewals and how many people have we helped successfully remain in their housing. And so what are some things that we have learned? I think probably most of you guys know this super well. Building a pipeline of trust is critical, and it takes a lot of time. And I'll tell you, when we were scaling to Raleigh, there was a lot of suspicion about this program from Charlotte coming to Raleigh. Community courage really matters. And what I mean by that, and this goes out to anyone working in the public sector that has to present in front of neighborhood groups or other types of constituents, you have to have a business community, a philanthropic sector, and local leadership that are ready to test new ideas and try new things. Homelessness is not a new issue, but it is growing, and the drivers of how and why people are falling into homelessness are different than they were 20 years ago. And it requires, I think, a different lens and different types of collaboration and different tools in the toolkit. We know that our model is effective, scalable, and efficient. When we were scratching ideas on a whiteboard in February of 2018, the idea and the intent was always to build something that could be replicated in other markets. And in 2023, we made a lot of investments in our people, our processes, and data, and we saw rapid increases in our impact. Every social service partner and resident is unique, and the runway for some partners can be longer than others. So, for example, when we expanded to Raleigh, the idea of lease ready was a new concept for many of our social service partners. There was an ethos in the social service ecosystem that if someone wanted housing, they were ready for housing. If you're a landlord or property manager, that's pretty scary to you. Community funding often follows results. So for Lotus in Charlotte, we actually self-funded our first year so that we could demonstrate impact and proof of concept. Our operating costs were much lower then, though, because we were a team of one. And so what's next for Lotus? We want to get up to facilitating housing for over 150 residents in Raleigh. We want to continue to expand our footprint in both markets. And then we want to look for, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th communities. So again, the ideas are really simple. What happens when we apply an economic lens to the supply and demand driver of the issue. What happens when we use trust building as a core value and a core foundational element to our program? And what happens when you remove all these unintended roadblocks on someone's path to safe, stable housing? And what we've seen is you can efficiently house people quickly. And I didn't mention this before, but our average annual cost to facilitate housing for someone is $1,200 per person per year. So if we compare that to the very outdated stats that say on average we're spending $37,000 per person experiencing homelessness, it's a great investment in getting people back on their feet. So with I'm going to stop sharing, and I would love for you guys to grill me and ask me any questions. You can ask me what battle we're building this. Anything sort of that could be instructive or helpful for your community. And for context, I actually know Charlottesville not super well, but grew up outside of DC, so I've spent many weekends there, and actually right before Thanksgiving drove through there on the way to Shenandoah National Park. So I'm familiar with a little bit of the rural urban dynamic, and have been there a handful. So.
Thank you very much, Beth. What questions or comments do we have for Beth about this program?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Is that Margaret? Hi,
This is Margaret. Yeah, sorry. Really interesting presentation and concept and everything. So I'm already all over your website. You say it costs you $1,200 per year to house an individual. What is that? Does that include the subsidy that I'm assuming that the social organizations are also chipping in some, and how much is that?
So the social service organizations are not paying for anything in our program. So say you're like the executive director of one of our social service partners, I actually give you money. You pay the landlord partner because I want a relationship with them. Now, that number does not account for like the case management services. But here's the important thing. Whatever the number is, it doesn't actually matter. It is the number in comparison to doing nothing, right? That is super important, because I think some of the challenge with this landscape and especially like the entire ecosystem of solutions being to some degree under attack is the alternative costs of doing nothing are so much higher, right? So that's sort of, I just like to say we're a small but mighty team. Here's sort of how we apply this philanthropy. This is what it looks like. By no means could we do any of this without our social service partners. But sort of, I think the effective argument for certain crowds is look at this in comparison to the emergency sort of triage costs that are out there.
Very good. Diantha, and then Kim.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there additional questions, or were you going to start calling on people?
Oh, if you were going to call, I'll let you be the MC. Yeah.
We'll do Diantha, then Kim, and then we'll watch for others.
Beth, thank you very much. This is fascinating, and I'm very interested in your program. A couple of thoughts, but I have, I guess, two questions. My first question is, would you help me understand better? And maybe I missed it because I was a little distracted at the very beginning, and I apologize for that. Help me with your funding and how your funding is layered.
Yes.
Because I'm sure it's layered in some way or another.
Actually, I have had to learn to be a fundraiser. I think if you had asked me 7 years ago if I wanted to do any fundraising or I thought I was a good fundraiser, I would have said no to both. We primarily are funded philanthropically, so individual donors, corporate donors, foundations. The other part of what we do, which is small, so it's not in this presentation, 3 out of the 4 co-founders, our background is in real estate development, investment, or policy. So we actually invest in multifamily properties. We have one property in Charlotte that if anyone comes to Charlotte, I will give you a tour. We invested 5% in that property. It was a $17 million project. What's earth-shattering about this is we got the use of we set aside 20% of the units for our program, which was 30 units for 7 years. We just recapitalized that property. We stayed in the deal. We brought on a new impact investment partner, but we get essentially a return on our investment for that. It's small. It goes back to the nonprofit. So we get a little bit of earned revenue from things like that, but it is largely philanthropic. The challenge with, I would say, homelessness is there is not enough public or philanthropic capital to solve it alone. So part of the sort of intention behind Lotus is who knows the most about real estate, leveraging other people's money, capital stacks, things like that. It's the real estate and investments sector. So we're trying to take that ethos into what we're doing, but we're also, as we grow, probably going to be trying to do a little bit more impact investing, like tiny amounts of investment in properties, one, to preserve affordable workforce, but also it offsets how much money we have to raise each year and gives us the use of those units. And we get to set the rent. So the property we have an investment stake in, we actually kept those rents at 45% of AMI for 7 years. So it is primarily philanthropic. There's a little bit of earned revenue from some real estate investment. And I would say sort of our most effective pitch to why we should be funded is, hey, we're taking an economic efficient approach. We are collaborating with all these great organizations that are doing the hardest work out there. And we don't want to exist in 10 years, right? So sort of the collaboration, aggregating the impact in the community, and hey, we're doing something, so hopefully we don't exist in 10 years. But I will say fundraising, for those of you who have to do it, it is a slog, and finding the right funders can be difficult, but I would say most communities have community leaders that care deeply about these issues. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to see these issues exacerbate over time. So sort of the urgency to be a part of the solution, hopefully, will be higher.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. And would you like Albemarle to be your next site? Just asking.
What's fascinating about sort of this group is you are sitting sort of urban and rural, and if we have time, I'd love to hear a little bit of sort of what you guys, Logan and Emily did a great job of giving me a landscape of the issues, but sort of what you feel like your biggest holes are in solutions. But
well, and I'll just make a comment and then let other people have a chance. But from my viewpoint, representing transit and transportation on this committee, certainly one of our big conundrums is the lack of connectivity regarding transportation and transit, because as you said, you can't have affordable housing if you can't connect people to grocery stores and hospitals and healthcare centers. And we're really struggling with that in our community, with people understanding that importance and looking at us as a larger region, and we can't do it just in the city and Albemarle. We have to be connected to the outlying counties. I'm just saying.
You can plan me in any public meeting you need me to go to.
Thank you. And I'll give others a chance here, but I appreciate this very, very much. Thank you.
Kim?
My question was very much similar to Diantha's, and wondering about your, how you got the ball rolling with the economic impact. So I was going to shift over to the rural versus urban and ask you if Charlottesville is the better option. We are experiencing homelessness significantly in the rural areas, which we had not experienced before. The difficulty is, for us, and I don't know if you can confirm this, you touched on a lot of this, we don't have the jobs available. We don't have the transportation available. We don't have the services available. in the rural areas to really satisfy the need. So there's an extraordinary amount of pushback that even if we had the funds to set up a facility, how do we solve these other issues that piggyback it? And yeah, I'd love to work together with the other counties in the Charlottesville area so that we're solving the homeless situation for the entire region, because we frankly, right, we pushed back in the rural areas because we weren't experiencing it the way Charlottesville was. We didn't see it every day, and it looks much different in the rural areas. You don't see people out on a park bench. They're out in the woods, they're in sheds, they're in RVs, but there is no doubt that there is a significant homeless population in the areas I serve in Fluvanna and Louisa. So yeah, getting that ball rolling, and very interested in how you guys figured out your collaboration. But I think what you're saying is the real linchpin here is the real estate market, and getting them engaged and involved, and then finding corporate sponsors.
Honest with you, I think I jumped off a cliff and didn't realize I was jumping off a cliff. I was like, oh, great, I get to start this thing with a mentor of mine. I've always been interested in how do you bring new tools to mission-based real estate? Like, this is a real tangible problem. We're actually creating something that could solve it. So, my very sort of glass half full, I was like, this is awesome. And then, the realities are things I think early on we experienced were one, that's never going to work. If it was so simple, why wouldn't have someone already have done it? Which, give me a challenge. Like, I'm like, all right, here we go. We also, with finding real estate partners early on, and I had a huge national network and a co-founder that had, for a long time in Charlotte, had owned one of the bigger multifamily companies. I literally was knocking on doors, and anytime someone said no to me, I was like, can I take you out to coffee? Can we have lunch? I just sort of was like, played dumb to just get them to let me say what we were trying to do. I think the thing that was helpful with finding real estate partners is there wasn't you must have 20% of your building participate. I was like, one unit, let's go. Why don't you test it out? Let's check in 3 months. Let's see how it's going. And so, to be honest, where actually we had the hardest amount of time, candidly, was with the social service community. So I was able early on in both markets, what we did is I found 3 social service partners and 3 landlord partners. We didn't officially launch, we just started beta testing, because I think when someone says that can't work or pokes holes in everything, I was able to say, well, we've housed 12 people already. We have these 6 partners, we're like learning lessons every day and refining our program. That especially helped when we went to Raleigh, which Raleigh, I don't know how much you guys know about Charlotte and Raleigh. Raleigh has a competition with Charlotte that Charlotte doesn't have with Raleigh. And, so the trust building, I remember a class in grad school, and the only takeaway I took from it was, what is the hardest thing to earn? Trust. What is the easiest thing to lose? Trust, right? So the trust building aspect is super important. It's long, it's slow, it's hard, and it's ongoing, but it really matters. And, I would say it's not like people welcomed us with open doors. We just rolled up our sleeves, got to work, left the door open for people who originally were skeptical, went to people who originally said no to being our partners early on, and said, I know you're not interested, but I'd love your thought partnership. Look, here's what we've done. Would love your insights, right? So that is a way early on, when we were really small, of sort of building that community of champions. Now, what's nice is because we're in 2 markets and we've built really strong bases of champions in both markets, we don't have those same issues, and we have ambassadors that can also do some of the myth busting and storytelling for us. And then if you follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, education and myth busting around these topics is really huge. And early on, I said, we're going to tell a different story, both about this issue and the solutions that exist. So, we sort of use our Instagram as a myth page. And then every time we have a big fundraising event, there's a learning component because, you got to change the narrative, right? So we did something, we created in both communities a game changer collaborative club. So anyone that wanted to help us change the game around solutions to homelessness and certain things like that, just they're slow and they're hard, but I think they work. And it's again, I can't say this enough. It's not like someone welcomed me with open arms when we were doing this. I got a lot more like, what are you doing? And for anyone here that deals with sort of the investment world, I had an investor of one of our landlords say to me, and forgive me, what the F are you doing? You're going to ruin these properties. Now he uses Lotus's partnership in all of his pitches to raise money and has been able to greatly increase the amount of money they raise. And they're a corporate donor of ours, and he's become a huge champion. So sort of someone sort of it's not their best self with me. I just remember sort of these anecdotes I've had along the way. And you leave the light on for them, right? Whether it's a couple months or a year down the line. But it is slow, hard work. And once it gets going, though, it is efficient and super impactful.
Any last questions or comments here? Obviously, the presentation is available in the packet. We will make sure it's available in the resource library. I want to be mindful of Beth's time. We went past a few minutes on the scheduled portion, but hope that if follow-up questions come from members of this body or not, that we could reach out and if further dialogue is needed, that'd be great. But I was thrilled to hear the content. I was very interested in how the money and the funding worked, so I appreciated that part being explained. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody here at the partnership, who are apparently camera shy. We're not very attractive people, so we keep our cameras on.
I'm bummed when I first got the invitation that this wasn't in person because I love Shenandoah National Park and I love Charlottesville. If you do something in person, put me on your list. But if I can be a resource, whether it's a year from now or 6 weeks from now, like, that is also part of Lotus's ethos is we want to help other communities. So, Logan and Emily have my contact information. Our website is a great resource. I have two phenomenal program directors that will talk to anyone and get even more into the weeds with you guys on sort of what we've changed, what's working. And we do have these data dashboards on our website. And then I would also just shameless plug, sign up for our newsletter. There might be something, we don't spam except for end of year. So if you sign up now, sorry, you're going to get like 3 more fundraising emails, but we just do a monthly newsletter. And we always have stuff we're reading, stuff we're learning, and we try to make them sort of as educational and informative as possible. So, and just once a month.
Speaking only for myself, I would love to have you in our community in person sometime to hear more.
Yeah. So let's make that happen. But in the interim, or, please, if I can be a resource, I mean, these are issues that are not unique to any community, but every community feels like they're the only community struggling.
And I was just going to jump in again. Thank you so much, Beth. Yeah, if folks have questions to follow up on, you can either email them to me or with your permission, Beth, I could, forward your contact information to people and speak directly. So either one works, but I just want to say thank you so much.
And could you forward to all of us a link to her newsletter? That would be great for us to easily sign up.
Sure.
Here,
that'd be great. Thank you.
Right now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Because well, actually, if you just go to our website, you will be a pop-up will come up, and that's how you can sign up. Or if you scroll all the way to the bottom. But if you sign up today, you'll get our newsletter tomorrow, which I think is interesting. So
Very good. And that's lotuscampaign.org. And if you Google Lotus Campaign North Carolina or Charlotte or the cities, it'll also pop up first. So very good. Thank you again so much, Beth, for your time today. Fascinating.
For having me. Bye.
All right, folks, we're going to move on to some brief staff updates. The first is the General Assembly outlook. David could not be with us, but Logan is going to handle that today in tandem with working with David. So, Logan?
Yeah. Oh, yes, you can hear me. Okay. Yes, I have a very brief, as you can see, it is one slide. Yeah, I spoke with David about this a couple weeks ago. Um, oh, Ruth, how do I go full screen here? Oh, slideshow. I don't know if that, can y'all see that? Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be better if you go back out of that presentation and just let us see the slides.
Yeah, you're in presenter view.
Okay. I'll just do this then.
You can
That's
uncheck.
visible.
Yeah, if you uncheck the under monitors where it says use presenter view, that would help.
Oh, okay.
And then you can present from current.
Oh, how about now? Does that do anything?
No, it's the
Frankly, if
wrong
you
screen.
scroll down, Logan, and click your slide, it is viewable, so you're fine to
All right,
proceed.
we'll just go here. So yeah, and speaking with David, I did study public policy, so I have some knowledge of things, but obviously I'm doing my best to channel him. There's actually not as much as I thought there would be in the sort of big General Assembly queue related to housing. The primary bill that is there is at the top of the list here, House Bill 4. This one speaks about um, authorizing localities. Basically, this is in the context of us being a Dillon rule state, but sort of opening up ordinances to give the locality itself the first right of refusal on publicly supported housing. So if a property that comes up on the market, it allows localities to step in to preserve that affordable housing. So I think that's sort of an interesting proposition. Obviously, the composition of the General Assembly is a little bit different this session in the state of Virginia. So we'll see how things transpire there. That was the main one that's in there. And speaking with David, there are a couple of bills from the last General Assembly session that might get resurrected in some form. And one of those is this faith and housing bill, which is an idea basically similar to the previous one with respect to the ordinances. It allows localities to bake into their zoning ordinance ways in which they can faith-based organizations like a church can expedite building affordable housing on their property itself. So I believe a lot of churches have sort of extra property that lays undeveloped, and with respect to folks' different missions to help their communities, this is kind of an interesting take on that. The other sort of complement to this is Mark Warner's congressional effort, basically the same bill, but in the U.S. Congress, that would provide similar support through technical assistance and grants. So helping, maybe those organizations garner some expertise to be able to develop their land with an eye towards affordable housing. The last one I'll mention is, again, another one from the previous General Assembly session from Senator Van Valkenburg, which sounds like it's going to be resurrected in some form. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more specific than its previous iteration, but the previous iteration essentially set targets for a 7.5% increase over a 5-year period in affordable housing in any given locality, which is pretty vague, but they provide a set of prescribed strategies that, to achieve that 7% increase. So again, that's one I hope they flesh out a little bit more this session. Anyway, that's a very rapid fire summary of what I have read. Obviously, more stuff will transpire, but this meeting sort of happens before the General Assembly starts, and the next one happens towards the very tail end. So I kind of wanted to give people a little bit of a preview of what you might expect to look for. And maybe David in our next meeting can can give a more retrospective or concrete look at what has actually happened in the session. So that's all I got. If anyone has any questions, I can attempt to answer, but if not, we can move on to Emily.
And Emily, but before Emily, we've got general housing program updates. Ruth, do you have a few updates to provide? Thank you, Logan.
I don't have a lot of updates to provide, but I just wanted to let everyone know that as the TJPDC does manage a few federal grants, we are closely watching what is happening at the federal level and also looking for some grant opportunities to help diversify what we do in terms of housing, whether it's helping with environment and housing, like the septic assistance program that we're doing, or looking at things related to economic development and housing. So just keeping you all apprised that there's some activity there, but nothing to report at the moment.
Great, thank you. And Emily, you have two, the advisory group update and the strategic plan survey. Emily is our Vista, for those who may not have met her yet.
Yeah, hi everybody. So for the advisory committee, if you need a refresher on what the advisory committee is, I'd be happy to put the presentation from the September meeting in the chat. It's also on the website under the past meeting materials. But in the last executive committee meeting, we discussed recruitment efforts and the executive committee members will reach out to connections they have at organizations that were either identified in the framework as good candidates for the advisory committee or organizations that they think would be a good way to expand the network of the group. If you are interested in helping with this outreach, but you're not on the executive committee, just reach out to staff or, yeah, and we can kind of loop you in and get that started. But we've already had a few organizations express interest, which is really exciting. So we'll probably have more updates on that by the next meeting.
And this, just as a reminder, if I could help push the plug, this is not requiring them to attend meetings. These are folks that would be really resources for us that could help make suggestions, that could provide information to us, content, requests that could even drive some of the presentations that we've made at our full partnership type meetings. By all means, this isn't one of those times where you ask somebody to be involved and then tell them they have a meeting schedule. You're able to have them participate and be helpful to us without actually putting in a whole lot of committed meeting time. All right, Emily.
Yeah. And my other thing to talk about is for strategic planning. The RHP's current strategic priorities run through 2025, which means that we have a good opportunity now to kind of reevaluate where we are, what we want to see out of this group, and what we want to achieve kind of over the next few years. This is going to be a longer conversation at our next quarterly meeting, but to kind of get everyone to start thinking about it and to have a good starting off point for these conversations, we have created a survey that I am going to put in the chat now, but also email out later. And this survey is anonymous. It should take 5 minutes or less, but it's just a way to get everybody on the same page and kind of start these conversations now while, this meeting is fresh and while it's on everyone's mind. And I'll also email this out after.
Thank you, Emily. All right, the next item, we're to our roundtable. So this is where we ask everyone to just provide some updates from their world that they're working in. I know that a few people, if they had to bolt early, may have put some updates in the chat. We'll make sure we capture those before we close out the chat. And I'm just going to move around the screen from what I see here. Diantha, you're the first in the top left. What do you have from transit? I know you've got some news to share.
Well, yes. And of course, we all heard the connections today with affordable housing and transit many times and transportation. The regional transit partnership has dissolved. So the last meeting for that partnership has happened. We feel like it was a very successful few years that we spent learning to trust each other and proving that we can play in the same sandbox together. And we have moved on now to our authority. So by state code, the way we were allowed by the General Assembly. Albemarle and Charlottesville had to start the regional the authority. So we have done that. We have created bylaws at this point, and we are looking now to begin meeting in January. Of course, I will not be on on Carter because I didn't run for reelection, but in January, the folks will continue that work, and the top priority will be to determine funding sources. And we're hopeful that other localities, other counties around us will join us, as well as the University of Virginia. And I'll let it go at that. But it's exciting work in the realm of transit coming up in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Diantha. Diantha has had to learn here in a lot of accolades from her almost 30 plus years of public service, but I think we all can recognize that her efforts as it relates to transit has been phenomenal. So I know everybody online today appreciates your work towards that. So you will be missed, but you can always join as an advisory committee member if you would like.
Well, keep me in mind, and everyone have a lovely holiday season. Thank you.
Going across the top, Kim, I've got you up next.
Hey there. We're continuing work on our housing development in Louisa County. Our first 4 units have arrived. There's going to be a total of 25 units when all is said and done. We're waiting on funding sources to build the remaining units, but all funding is in place for the infrastructure, which is significant, requiring us to pass under the railroad for water and sewer connection. So lots of fun dealing with railroad. We have still been going gangbusters with essential home repair, but I'm very excited that Ruth said they are looking at different options for different funding for a variety of programs. HPG came in really low this year, so I'm assuming that's one of the areas we're trying to diversify. We do have our older adult home modification program that has just gotten up and running, and we're working with Margaret Claire over at Nelson County as well, and incorporating Nelson with that. So just kind of going full charge ahead, nothing else.
Thank you, Kim. Rachel from UVA, Rachel Hobbs.
Sure. Hi. Happy to share that the review team for the developer selection at North Fork has made a selection. And so that required a lot of deliberation, and we're excited that that developer has been named and will be moving forward with that site next year.
I had not heard that yet. Thank you for that update. Annette Hyde, I've got you at the Workforce Investment Board. Hello? You are muted.
I love it when it gives me the prompts to do that now. Just a quick funding update. Virginia Career Works Piedmont received funding from Virginia Works, and this funding will provide $60,000 to support employer-led upskilling in high-demand sectors like incumbent worker training, on-the-job training, and work-based learning experiences that directly address the regional's talent needs. Our service providers are identifying businesses in our region that can benefit from this funding.
Awesome. Thank you, Annette. And Kurt Kiesacker over at VRW.
Hey, everybody. Just quick report on jobs that we have ongoing in our office. The good folks have started moving into the Hickory Hope apartments at Southwood Community. So that's 121 units, and we'll be filling up over the coming months. We are continuing to be under construction at Vista 29 on Route 29 North for formerly homeless through Support Works Housing. So that project is topped out and windows going in and all kinds of things there. And we have a number of projects working with Piedmont Housing Alliance that are in the planning stages, not the least of which is the partnership with the foundation on the Fontaine Avenue site at Piedmont site, it's called, which is actively pursuing rezoning. So a number of efforts ongoing in our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those updates, Kurt. And we'll move up to Greene County. Mr. McCloskey, I see you're next on my screen.
Yeah, so Greene County, yes, actually this evening we have Planning Commission meeting. So we've been looking at agricultural events, farm wineries, breweries, distilleries. So looking at surrounding counties, what they have in place, but we've been going at this this is going to be our 9th meeting, includes 2 joint meetings with the supervisors of the county and just, I guess, a small segment of the county with a little pushback. So yeah, we're hoping that this public meeting and then it goes on to the board for a vote next year that will come to the end of it, hopefully. But just trying to encourage as Virginia dictates that, you try not to restrict these type of activities and bring income to our local agricultural community. Secondly, the water project for Virginia has groundbreaking activities. So there's been funding, grants that were approved. So it is moving forward. So they're looking at like the water intake, working at supply line, and the White Run Reservoir is kind of the name of the overall project, but getting started on that project. So that's a big move ahead for the county, and I guess a lot of uncertainty that has some resolution at this point, but still a lot of activity ahead. Still infrastructure for the town of Standardsville for water and sewer needs to be addressed and is currently not a project identified. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And good afternoon, Will. I see you next. Will Park.
Yeah, thanks. Couple things we have going on. First of all, we have completed our lease up of the 124 unit affordable project in Fluvanna County, the Coves, which is good since all those units are at or below 60% AMI. We're completing a lease up in Charlestown, West Virginia, 280 units there. And then we are in lease up of another project we just completed in Winchester, 200 units there. So things are going pretty well. 80 townhomes for sale under construction in Blacksburg. And then renovation of 2 affordable projects in rural areas that we did about 20 years ago, one in Lawrenceville, Virginia, and one in Culpeper, Virginia. So we're still trying to keep the housing in the rural areas. And then we should break ground first quarter, Zion's Crossroads, about 220 units. And then we have another probably 300 units in Harrisonburg that we're working through the site plan process. So a lot going on. Very fortunate.
That's great, Will. You do have a lot going on. Thank you, sir. We'll hit Nelson County. We got both Jesse and Ernie. Ernie, I see you, so we'll start with you and then see if Jesse would like to add.
Okay. Kim, thanks for the shout out to Nelson and Margaret's work. If she's here, she knows more about what she's doing than I do. But what I do know is that at 5 o'clock this afternoon, we're having a complete run through of our new draft ordinances for land use that are going to go to public hearing right after the first of the year. So that's a big deal. It'll probably take us quite a while into the wee hours tonight to go through everything. but we're dedicated to getting it all done and looking forward to dealing with things like minimum lot sizes in A1 and all the various things that you all have to deal with wherever you are, just like we do, to try to make housing a better reality and having homes for our folks in our county. So that's it here.
Thank you, Ernie. Jesse, anything to add? Jesse, get distracted. All right, if he pops back on, we'll come back. Counselor Snook, I see you up next.
So Charlottesville's got a number of interesting things going on. Some, well, for example, the litigation to challenge our new zoning ordinance finally got settled. The only thing we have to do is we have to do some sort of an analysis of our transit operations, which not transit operations, our transit plan, transportation plan, which we were going to do anyway. In coming up next month in January, we will be having a look at a number of our policies behind how we're proposing to deal with student housing projects, not university-run housing projects, but projects that will cater to university students. The particular issue is that there are a number of large projects that are contemplated in the West Main Street corridor that will house potentially hundreds and hundreds of students, but also are in areas that are historically Black neighborhoods or adjacent to areas that are historically Black neighborhoods, and people are upset about the magnitude, the size of those buildings, and how they will loom over the Black neighborhoods. We've got issues. People are concerned about, for example, about 200 units of housing that are affordable, that are coming out of the affordability period because it's been 15 years, 20, however long ago, 20 years ago, however long ago it was. And we have to figure out what we're doing about those. Some of those are in the county. We hope that the county will contemplate doing something for Mulside Forest is the project in the county that's coming out of their affordability period. And then, of course, we've got a homeless shelter that we're trying to deal with, a low barrier shelter. And we've just signed and we have actually gone ahead and bought a property on Holiday Drive that we hope to be able to convert into that homeless shelter. The plans are still being worked out. So lots of stuff going on.
Thank you very much, Counselor Snook. And let's see, Margaret, Claire, I believe if you're still there, I think you are next.
Hi. We are doing the apartments in Roseland, which is two duplexes, so that's 4 apartments. Kind of, working through the weather and the septic and all of the connections and electricity, and nothing ever, goes as planned. But they're there and they're being finished, and we're very excited about doing that. We started finding people who are interested in renting them, so that process is underway as well. We are kicking some serious hiney in the rehab area. We've done, usually we do about 10 a year, and this year to date, and we're only like halfway through, we've already have 14 in either finished or in some level of completion. So shout out to Rose Valentino, who's been managing that program for me, and also working with Fluvanna Louisa on the Older American home modification program, which I call OMF for reasons we know about, but we will not disclose. So anyway, yeah, it's very busy, and I'll be ready for a break in the next couple weeks. Thanks.
A well-earned one. Thank you, Margaret. Let me ask if I went through the partnership members. I do want to recognize, thank you, Greg, for joining. Greg is a past Regional Housing Partnership member. You should think about coming on to our advisory committee to do a little recruitment officially to you right there. But did I miss anyone I should have included in the roundtable by going around the screen? All right, no one is saying that I did. So December meetings are always tough. Things get changed around from normal schedules. So I really appreciate everyone taking the time and hope you found the content helpful. If you have ideas or thoughts on content that can be used in these in the quarterly present partnership meetings, please send them our way for ideas and thoughts. It looks like we already have some stuff booked for March, but we can add in a smaller presentation and are already turning our eyes to June to see what we can do in June. So. Thank you for the team for that. Staff, is there anything that I'm missing that I need to include in an update? Logan and or Ruth?
I think you got it on my end.
Great.
Yeah, just to note that the next executive committee meeting will be virtual, but the next full partnership meeting will be in person.
In person. So if you're not aware, the Water Street Center and the PDC offices are going through a renovation. The commission did vote to allow that to happen and working with the owners of that space. So there'll be some virtual meetings in January and February, but when we all walk back in there the next time in March, it should be a brand new looking, refreshed space that I think all of us include, and most especially the staff, will be appreciating having done. So thank you, everyone. I hope you all have happy holidays. The executive committee will meet January 28th and the partnership March 25th, my daughter's birthday. So I hope you all enjoy the season and have a happy new year. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, y'all. See ya.
Thank you.